People who worked in restaurants. What was the worst customer that you had to deal with? Worked in a popular restaurant for a while. We usually have quite a long wait, 30 to 40 minute waits, during dinner service, and people are told by the hosts about this. There was this lady who got fed up with the wait after 10 minutes. She stormed into the restaurant, stood next to a table of 4 people, and literally asked them, "Are you guys done? We've been waiting for a long time now, and would like to have the table if you guys are just chatting." Was completely mind blown how people are able to not give an F and pull something like this in public. A customer ordered one of our daily specials and didn't like it, so instead of complaining to me about the food and letting me offer something else, she complained to my manager about me. This was May of last year. In August of last year, turns out she was one of my college professors for the semester, teaching a management course. She recognized me the first day, but I played it off like I didn't know her. We called him Big Red. He always wore a 3XXXL red shirt and would come in by public transportation as soon as we opened on unlimited rib day. He would bring in his 64-ounce big cup and request we fill it with our soda. Because we couldn't keep up with his refill needs with average cups, we would fill this cup 3 to 4 times. He would proceed to gorge himself on ribs over 2 to 3 hours. He would usually stop for a one-time 30-minute shit break in the middle of it. He smelled like rancid ass. Looked just as bad. I don't think he was employed and he never tipped. It was a rite of passage for new servers to have to take him. This was 2007. I doubt he is still alive. Our bar was having a private party. A drunk dude walks in and orders a drink. I knew he wasn't with the party, based on his attire and that he came in every so often. I told him I couldn't get him a drink. He lost his mind, told me to F off and then wanted to fight me. On his way out, he yelled that we should put up signs. As he walked by the signs on the door saying we were closed for a private event, he came in the next day sober and apologized. Barista here had a guy that regularly came in and ordered a complicated drink. He always finished the order by asking for a finger swirl in the drink. If you gave him a confused look, he would say, "Well, how else am I gonna taste you?" He was the worst. I used to work in a bar that sold very old booze. A drunk man tried to impress his friends by chugging from a bottle of Amaro from the early 60s. He had to pay for the whole thing since his lips touched it and it was useless. Cost him around $800. Way back in the 80s, I worked in a restaurant that was a favorite of a celebrity chef of those days, Jeff Smith, the frugal gourmet. Never seen a bigger asshat than that guy. Literally make our servers cry. Nothing was ever right. He was beyond rude and condescending, yet he kept coming back. He had a reputation of being a jerk off camera. Eventually he was disgraced by being outed as a child predator, and was quickly forgotten by all. Our restaurant was a good place. Another celebrity chef of the time, Graham Kerr, the galloping gourmet, was always a pleasure to have visit. After a wedding reception ended at our facility, we were cleaning and I began the cleaning process on our espresso machine. The party was over almost a half hour already. The process takes 12 minutes. People were still there as the party slowly let out, and the father of the bride asks me for an espresso. I told him I could get it to him, as we have a strict policy of always trying to satisfy a guest's needs. But the machine was cleaning and it would be done in about 10 minutes. He begins ranting about how much he paid for the wedding, and stormed to our banquets manager and told them I refused to make it for him. Manager is a d-bag and starts ripping me in front of the guy. I show both of them that the machine is just finishing the cleaning process and it was impossible to make it beforehand. I got suspended for 2 weeks. Work in a place that is frequented by local families and youth sports teams. On Sundays, this one large group of people always come in and they are the worst. The parents drink and ignore their preteens, who run around playing games in the entire restaurant, disrupting everyone else. They have tried to walk in a party of 45 during end of year sports party season when we are booked solid, and get mad that there isn't enough space for them, and they modify everything like crazy and leave $0 for a tip. It's at least once a month the entire group comes in, and weekly for some of the individual families. I worked at Friendly's in high school as a server, and this brings back so many painful memories. Worked my ass off all night once for a whole soccer team and parents who came in with no notice. Then at the end of the night, they wanted everything split up. The kids were sitting at different tables, so trying to get the right kid's food to the right parent was near impossible. Not to mention, some kids split meals or got specialty drinks and ice cream or appetizers. Some parents were trying to tell me what their kid ordered. Others were just saying whatever the blonde kid with the headband ordered, etc. It was impossible to know who got what and who was supposed to be charged with it. Not to mention, about half of them had coupons that they were all switching around with each other, some of which were expired, but they wanted to use them anyway because they were spending so much money. A huge portion of the bill had to be comped because no one would claim a bunch of items, and I didn't think to tell them beforehand they couldn't split the bill 17 ways. After reprinting checks about 10 times, because God forbid someone pays an extra $2 on a milkshake they said their kid didn't order even though you could look over at the table and see half the kids had milkshakes. I was in the back crying. My manager was yelling at me over what a fiasco this was, and mad because the kids had been drawing on the tables and throwing crayons at other customers over the partition. I finally come back out to hopefully get everyone change or swipe cards or whatever, and one of the dads had the audacity to tell me to not look so stressed out. It's just Friendly's. F you whoever that guy was. They then left me about a $15 tip in total for the 3 hours I waited on them, with a bill that was easily over $400. A lot of them tipped on the coupon price instead of the actual cost, and a lot of them just left whatever change was left over. This one guy who basically hated his order so much, waved me over and told me to put my hand out, then proceeded to spit out entirely what was in his mouth into my hand, then told me to refund him and make him something else. I waited tables for a few years in college, and the worst table that I ever had was a Catholic priest and some guy he was trying to hit up for donations. The whole meal he was very condescending and demanding. After everything was done, I left the check at the table. He ended up walking out, stiffing me not just on the tip, but on the entire check. He even stole the leather check holder thing. I reported this to my manager. A couple weeks later, this same guy comes in with about 20 members of his congregation. My manager told him he wasn't welcome in our restaurant after walking out on his previous tab, in front of his whole party. They all ended up leaving to go elsewhere. Best manager I've ever had. Guess he never heard of the commandment thou shalt not dine on dash. A homeless guy who came in, actively dripping blood from his hands, and started screaming at me and threatening me, because I wouldn't give him a bakery item without him paying. He was dripping blood all over the counter, and spitting everywhere until I threatened to call the cops. A huge group of clearly rich kids who came in, stole a bunch of drinks, and left the dining room trashed. A guy who demanded I take money from our tip jar to help him pay for his order, and argued with me when I said no. People who would place large orders, or even take home a cake and eat half of it, then flip their shit and demand a refund when they'd find out it was all vegan, even though that fact was well advertised. My friend works at a restaurant. A vlogger was shooting a video, and since it was allowed within the place, nobody troubled her. Apparently she wanted one of those Girls Gone Wild clickbait thumbnails, so she asked my friend to place his face in her breast while she squirted ketchup on herself. My friend refused, as he was in a relationship, but some other employee agreed to do so. After they shot the thumbnail, she marched in the next day claiming sexual assault. I don't know what happened after that, but it did not turn out good for the liar. Bartending in a restaurant a few years ago, there was a private party, and one of the guests asked me to plug in his iPhone to listen to a song. No big deal, I did it and he tipped me $20. He left his phone behind the bar and got wasted. When he was leaving I said, "So don't forget about your phone." He threw a beer on me and told me to leave him the F alone, and told me get a real job. Guess who got to keep a nice new iPhone? I worked in Domino's. I had a guy throw a handful of pennies at me while laughing. The 30 odd cents was my tip. He was mad when I turned around and walked away without picking any of them up. His exact words were, "Oh, my money not good enough for you? Fine. I'll never order Domino's again." I've never had a customer fire themselves like that before. It was great. I had a guy that was a germaphobe and had really bad OCD. He came through before and my coworker didn't want to deal with him. So I went to the drive-through window after washing my hands. I cashed out the order that was on screen, and he reluctantly handed over his card. I gave him the coffee that I cashed him out for. He started yelling at me saying that it was wrong. Apparently the person that took the order forgot to type it in. Unfortunate, but it happens. He started yelling at the coworker that didn't want to take his order at the window. So instead of just saying that it was the wrong order, getting refunded and being on his way, he stayed in the driveway for 20 minutes telling my coworker that she was stupid and unprofessional and was unfit to be a supervisor. He kept demanding that we get the phone number of our franchise owner, but apparently the number was wrong and he kept yelling at us. But when we came back to the window after 20 minutes of this, he left. My supervisor went into the back to cry. I felt so bad for her. She's the sweetest person. Fast forward less than a month later, he called the store to apologize, and the manager made sure that my coworker never dealt with him again, but he could come in as long as he didn't make a scene. He told the manager that his therapist told him he should apologize. He spent a combined total of 3 hours on the phone with the manager, where he apologized and also blamed us for making him late to his appointment that day. And at the end of the phone call, he asked if we were hiring. Had a man and his wife come in during a really busy lunch rush. He was rude off the bat, interrupting me, not wanting to listen to me speak, whatever. It happens all the time. He was very adamant that he wanted both chips and salsa and a plate of roasted wings as appetizers. He kept emphasizing that he wanted them together before they ordered their lunch, even though chips and salsa only take a minute and wings take about 12. I rang them in together because of how he ordered them. In hindsight, I should have made completely sure, but not 3 minutes later, the man is waving at my coworker across the restaurant, yelling at her about how they've been there for 30 minutes, and his appetizer is taking too long and he wants it before his wings. I was at a party table, so she ran back and grabbed the chips and the wings, which were somehow up as well, and brought them out. He took one bite of a wing and tossed the plate like a frisbee across the table towards her, and started complaining about them being cold. I rush over to see what's going on and he starts yelling at me, saying his food is awful and this is the worst service he's ever gotten in his life. I don't do well with grown men yelling at me, so I went to the kitchen and my manager went out and thankfully had my back as much as he could, and made the guy pay for the wings and the chips and then leave. After he left, I started to clean the table, where I found the single penny he tipped me with. I later got a call from my general manager asking why a man had called me professionally challenged on Yelp. There was an old couple I loved, who used to come in every single week to the restaurant I worked at. They were super nice and clearly still very much in love. I'd always kinda thought of them almost like role models of how I'd like to be in my retirement. They lived a couple of towns over in a picturesque place, and would always have nice stories about what they'd been up to. The guy spoke like Ray Winston, which made him cool in my eyes. Serving them always made the shift better. Anyway, one day we were doing a charity thing for World Hunger Day, specifically for children in Africa, and there were relevant pictures of starving kids on the flyer we gave with the bill. It was one of those checkmark here if you want to add 25 cents or something things. It was a bit cringe, but most customers were like whatever, it's only 25 cents. So anyway, I take over the bill, and the guy totally blindsides me with his response, "I ain't giving no money to some effing C-word." I was caught off guard, and stood in silence as he went into a massive racist rant. I'd totally never expected that. I'd seen these guys as people to aspire to, and it turns out they were massive bigots. I was gutted. I worked at a fast food place near a high school. The absolute worst were the moms. Had one who came in weekly, and screamed about wrong orders or whatever complaint she could dream up, so she could get free food for her entire family. Then you get the loser douches who think harassing employees is funny. The absolute worst customer was the owner of the franchise. He'd walk in, test employees, and then fire someone for some issue so minor, it was likely just made up.